Hello again. This is Howard Wayland, and today we're going to talk about that business opportunity called franchises. I hope that you'll enjoy this, and I hope it'll give you some insight into determining how to properly get the right franchise and the pros and cons of franchising. What we'll discuss today: identify the major pros and cons of franchising, explain franchising options and structure of the industry, and describe the process for evaluating a franchise opportunity. First thing I like people to do whenever they're going to look at a business is to do something called a SWOT analysis. Now, anybody who's at an MBA or has a business degree will know a little bit about a SWOT analysis. What it stands for is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. No matter what you are actually looking at, there will be strengths in the company, there's going to be weaknesses, there's going to be great opportunities or less opportunities, and there's going to be threats. Now, anytime you start or even buy a franchise, whether you buy it or start it from scratch, there's always going to be the threat that you're not as big as somebody else, that you're not as well capitalized, just the nature of the industry. Now, to get a better idea of SWOT analysis, if you go to the resource section in the members section of our website, you'll see a couple of SWOT analysis I did on an MBA program, so feel free to go through there and do that. Franchising itself. It's a marketing system revolving around a two-party agreement whereby the franchisee conducts business according to terms specified by the franchisor. I hate to say this, but basically a franchisee is putting a lot of his money to operating a system. Generally it's a store or some kind of service that the franchisor, the one who actually contracts you to give you the right to be a franchise, really has the total control. They're going to tell you what colors to have your deal, maybe even how to build your place exactly. If you've ever gone to McDonald's, you don't see different signs, you don't even see different hamburgers. Worldwide, McDonald's is a McDonald's. Now, in some countries, they'll add one of the local delicacies to it, but they still can get a Big Mac anywhere you want. So keep that in mind on franchising. The other thing is it's important to know that they have the right, nearly in every contract, to terminate the contract. Now, there could be implications to that, but they can. A good case in point recently, all the cars companies, and all of them, Chrysler and GM specifically, their brands of cars, they decided to get rid of franchisees of certain brands, even the brands that weren't going away, like Chevy and Cadillac. They just eliminated some of the brand dealers. Well, these dealers, they not only had to have those particular locations exactly as the franchisor, let's say Cadillac, wanted it, and sometimes they spent $2, $3, $4, $5 million, and I know several of them that just upgraded them because the franchisor forced them to do the upgrades, and they spent $3 and $4 million, and now they can't sell cars. So I mean, understand that is always a risk in franchises, so keep that in mind. The franchisee is the entrepreneur whose power is limited by the contractual agreement with the franchisor. Remember, it's his brand, the franchisor's brand, and they're the ones in control. The good news is not all bad, though. They do have some things that are positive. The franchisor, the party of the franchisee contracts, that specifies the methods to be followed and the terms to be met by the other party. And most franchises are very, very specific in what you must do to maintain your franchise for that particular company. But just keep those. I want to get you to understand the terms first. There's a lot of pros and cons, but the limitations start with the franchise cost. You generally have to put up an initial amount of money, a franchise fee. You've got investment costs. You're going to have to build out the location if it's required to have a location to specific requirements, and sometimes using their particular contractors and done in their particular way. Oftentimes this is quite expensive, and many of the good franchises though will have some kind of financing arrangement for the franchisor so they can help them finance the deals. However, you still got to pay the money back, not the franchisor. You do. Royalty payments. Every time McDonald's sells a hamburger, you got to pay McDonald's a certain hamburger price. They also own all the locations, as I understand it, and you're supposed to pay rent to them. That's really where they make their money, not on the hamburger pennies, but the rent location rentals. And you got to pay advertising costs. You got to help them advertise millions and tens of millions of dollars a month in some cases, and you're paying that as part of that fee. Restrictions on the business operations. You have to do things their way. I mean, for instance, McDonald's again is one of the top franchises, and they have Hamburger University. Your management team has to go through it before you can flip a burger for them. You have got to do it their way, with their equipment, with their vendors, just like they want. The good news is they've been successful doing it, so it does help your potential to be success. You lose independence. I mean, you lose a lot of the controls. They basically tell you how to do it. And lack of franchisor support. Depending on the franchisor, you may not have much support. You may have a ton of support. It just depends. But in most cases, you're going to have to do it their way, but they're not going to give you a lot of support other than tell you what they're going to want you to change. The advantages are several too. You need to know that. The probability of success. That's one of the things. You don't see many McDonald's restaurants failing. As a matter of fact, they generally close them and move them to better location. They generally don't have failures. And if you want to go out of business and sell, you got to sell to one of their franchisees or to them. But they're more than happy to accommodate you in helping that. It is a proven method of success. Now, obviously, not all franchises have 100% approval or success rate, because they don't. But going on your own, you have at least, I think it's less than 10 or 20% of the companies are still in business after 5 years. Well, you're going to be talking about an 80 to 90% success rate in 5 years. So your chances of success are greater. You have a proven line of business. Most franchise companies, and I'm going to have a list of the top 20 for 2011 from Entrepreneur Magazine listed in this presentation. But every one of those names, maybe one of them you don't, but the rest of them, you just know the name. You just know them. I mean, because they're always out there. So keep that in mind. The pre-qualifications of a franchisee. I mean, generally franchisees, and this depends on the size, amount of money, and so forth, will require substantial cash in the bank, provable, good credit, solid business acumen. They're going to require a lot of things. So there's a lot of pre-qualifications of franchisees. So you have to meet those requirements also. Training. The franchisor provides it. They provide the training to help you out, at least in their specific area of expertise. Financial assistance. The franchisor generally does assist, and this, I don't mean that they co-sign loans for you, but they generally have big banks that work with them, with qualified franchisees, to be able to fund and finance the franchisee's operations, which is a big plus, because if you're on your own, financing is one of the more difficult things to happen. And operating benefits. The franchisor does help you in terms of making sure that you make the grade. And so, yes, they may be picky on what they want, but on the other hand, that's because they've gone through proven times of knowing that this is a successful method. No matter what you're doing, whether you've got a janitorial service from, or if you've got a restaurant from Hot Wings Things or whatever. The point is, they've got some benefits of helping you understand the business and helping it be success. And that's the biggest advantage, I think, of the franchisors, especially that and the financial support. They've got a proven success track record. That's important. There's the pluses and minuses of the franchising calculation. The pluses. You got much greater likelihood of success. You get formalized training. This is especially helpful for people who may be great at what they do, but are not great at business. This will be helpful to you. Financial assistance, proven marketing methods, managerial system, quicker startup time. I mean, they've got, if you can hire people who've been at McDonald's, and you can hire McDonald's managers. So you're going to have people at McDonald's or Hardee's or Pizza Hut or even Jana King or any of the other franchises, Subways, that will be ready to move. Whereas if you're starting from scratch a restaurant, you're going to have to put your menus together, train the people on how you want the places set, how you want delivery of the food, the whole bit. They won't know what you're wanting. In a franchise, they do. Minuses, franchise fees. You pay up front. You got to pay monthly. Whether you make money or not doesn't matter. I mean, they want you to make money, but they're getting paid before you do. You're the last one personally who's going to get paid. You've got restrictions on growth. You do, let's say the franchise just goes gangbuster. You want to go get another franchise. They may say, no, you've already promised the person there to do it, and you can't get it. But I've got one in Muncie, Indiana, and you may be in New Orleans or Baton Rouge, and all of a sudden, I don't want to go to Muncie. It's hard to do both of them that far away. Well, that's what I've got available for you. So understand there's going to be great restrictions on growth. You're going to have very less independent operations. Franchisor may be the sole supplier. In other words, you may be buying everything from them, every piece of meat, food, supplies, everything. And that they can control the prices. You might get it a lot cheaper elsewhere. And there's temptation to use others, but you will find yourself losing your franchise if you do anything that they tell you not to. And they always have a termination and renewal clause. Now, not always renewal clause, but every one of them has a termination clause. A renewal clause is they may have to renew you every year. They choose not to renew you. Now, you've got all this money built up into whatever organization you've bought into. You've got your name going. You put your own advertising beyond what you pay them to promote it. Things are starting to go well, and they can terminate you, or they just cannot renew. You're done. It just happens that way. Franchising from a franchisor's perspective. Let's look at why do they want you? They have drawbacks. Reduction of control. Remember, if you own it still, even though you're required to do certain things, there is some reduction of control. I'm going to give you a case in point, again, using McDonald's for the example. McDonald's had a lawsuit. They were sued by their franchises. The reason for it is they were selling 99-cent double cheeseburgers, and the franchises cost them like $1.15. McDonald's said, make it up in volume. That's a bad joke. You can't make it up in volume. But the point is, what they did was they sued them because McDonald's was requiring the franchises to sell something at a loss as part of their agreement. And they said that wasn't right. The franchisees won the lawsuit. McDonald's couldn't do that any longer. There is reduced control. If McDonald's owned the store, they could have done it if they wanted to as a loss leader, and they couldn't do anything about it. Sharing of profits. I mean, they have to share the profits now with you. That's they could have had all that profit if they owned the store. Increase in operational support cost. You as a franchisee cost more to support you than if they had a company-run store that had more stringent controls in place. So keep that in mind. They're losing out there. But they have some benefits. Reduction of capital requirements. Now, they've set up banks to help you get financing. The reason for it is the banks believe that there's a good franchisor, and they believe that the franchisees, if they're qualified, could make good loans. Well, the franchisor is not borrowing the money, though, so it doesn't go on their balance sheet as a liability against them and hurting their ratios for other bank loans that they may need. So that's the biggest benefit for the franchisor. Increase in management motivation. Obviously, if you own the franchise, you're much more motivated to success than if you're just a manager of a company-owned store, because you have nothing in the game. Speed of expansion. Because they're not having to use their particular amount of capital, they can expand much more quickly than if they had to own each store and build it out. Franchisor controls on franchisees. Restricting sales territory. No matter what franchise you own, you will be restricted on the territory. Now, it may be, if you're any restaurant, a Subway for instance, the territory ever comes to you. but you may not can have a bunch of subways all over the place or in a concentrated area. That just depends on the franchisor's decision. You will be restricted, even if you're a Jani-King franchisee or a Service Pro or ServPro, and you've got janitorial services that you would deliver. They're going to limit you where you can do it, so you're not running over another particular franchise's territory. Requiring site approval, imposing requirements on the outlet's appearance. They will have appearance, signage, all kinds of requirements. If you've ever gone to Subway, it all's got the old tunneled 1890 Subway, or it used to have the wallpaper in there. All looked alike. The line to get all your sandwich materials was all down the same line. I mean, everything was the same. That's why you'll always see a Subway. Nearly all, especially restaurant vendors, are going to be very strict on that. The ones that are service-oriented vendors, maybe a little bit, but they still will have to have their signage, but they will have specific site requirements that they will require. Restricting goods and services that can be sold. I mean, if you're at a Subway, you better not be selling anything else, or McDonald's. Just the way it is. You've got to sell their product and their product alone. Requiring specific operating hours. They'll require that you've got to be open certain hours. You can be open maybe more, but at least certain hours. Controlling the advertising. In some cases, they'll actually have to get approval for ads before they can be run. In most cases, they're going to be telling you exactly what has to be in the ad for legal purposes, like independently owned and operated, or something like that, so that they can't necessarily be sued on it. But there's going to be strict controls on the franchisees. What I've done here is looked at the cost of getting a wing zone. This was done 3 or 4 years ago by me, and this is some of the cost just to get it launched. Low end and high end, that'll depend on where you're located, etc. And but you got to pay a franchise fee. Depending on your territory, go to $20,000-$25,000. And again, this wing zone was like done in 07, so it's very possible these fees will be changed. But a leasehold improvements. Now, if you lease a space, you've got to make that vacant space into the wing zone restaurant. So you've got to have tables, chairs. You've got to have a kitchen with certain equipment. You've got to have the way it looks and other things that they may require. That's leasehold improvements on the actual real property. The equipment itself, like the kitchen, would be separate. That's from $48,000 to $53,000. Signs, that's your signage outdoors that you've got to have specific signs. A POS is point of sale system. That's your cash register, but it tells every time you go in there on a WingSync, and it tells you what kind of wings. They hit the button on what you're ordering. It tells the back what's being ordered. It tells Wing Zone what has been sold for deliveries the next day. It keeps all your inventory controls and everything else. Not cheap, 18 grand. Office equipment, phone system. You got to have maybe a separate computer for your QuickBooks and so forth, and a phone system. A drop safe so that you can drop money so that people don't stick you up and rob you. So it's one of those delayed safes, and so you can also make it much more difficult to be robbed. Digital security systems. You don't have to have it, but if you're going to spend this much money on a place, you better have something to protect it. Initial investment, inventory, you're going to have wings to start with, and French fries, and salad, and all that stuff. You're going to have that initial inventory. You're also going to have something when you're launching the business, startup marketing. That's going to cost money, and that you're going to have to put the ads in the paper, get the signage outside, get the mayor to come, all the things you want to do to try to do this to make it a grand opening. And then the grand opening fund will actually have the extra things. You might have Bozo the Clown there, or whatever clown you may have, bouncy places, who knows. The point is, you want to draw attention to your business, especially at the grand opening. Insurance, you're going to have workman's comp. You're going to have liability. These are required in every state. So you're going to have to pay something for that. It's generally a percentage on the workman's comp of the salaries, depending on if the person's a cook, it'll be one rate versus a waitress, etc. Now, if it's the other thing you're going to have is an insurance that I recommend, especially if you have a restaurant, because you never can tell when something goes down, and that's interruption insurance. If your business is interrupted, and I can give you a great case in point. I live in the Houston Metroplex, and in the metropolitan area, we had Ike a few years ago. Ike is a hurricane. I was out of town coming back. My wife was here. It was Category 3 when it came through. It took probably 70% of the roofs had some damage, a lot of damage all over the place. Everything was down. Power was down, water was down. It was like a ghost town here a day or two afterwards. It was 2 weeks before restaurants and most businesses could be operational again. And restaurants couldn't reopen until the health department actually came out and inspected it, because they didn't want you to have your inventory. You're out of electricity for 2, 3, 4 days. Guess what happens to your food? It's bad. You had to throw it away. They wanted to make sure that happened so people didn't get sick. So you have that disruption insurance. Your people can get paid, and you can have the loss of that time and the loss of food, etc., to help you out. Initial training expenses. You're going to have to be trained. Like I said, most places require you to do training. Well, guess who pays for it? Either it's in the franchise fee or they have a separate training fee. Uniforms. Nearly every franchise brands their name on everything. Uniforms, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's JaniServe, they're going to have branding of their particular product and their particular brand everywhere, and that's going to be required, including the uniforms. Utility deposits, architectural plans for the leasehold improvements, real estate costs. Even if you get a real estate broker to, in most cases, you'll hire them to get a space for you, and then they got to get the approval of the franchisor. They're going to charge you commission. And then you're going to have working capital. Okay, you got all the stuff there, but you're going to have money for change in the register for a few days till you get the thing making money, and it may take a lot longer than a few days. That working capital is very minimal. But your total money you're going to need to get the thing basically opened is $189 to $249, and that doesn't include, this could take 6 months to a year, so any costs associated with you having to live is also something that's going to have to be a charge. Franchising agreements. You have a franchisee's contract. That's the one that you're going to sign, that's going to be the agreement between you and them. And that's the one that's going to tell you they can terminate you, or it's got to be renewed and so forth. They do not have to renew you. Keep that in mind. Make sure, we'll talk about who you need to have look over these things beforehand, but you're going to have to make sure that you're comfortable with it. The franchisee, the privilege conveyed to the franchise in the franchise agreement, that they're going to give you a privilege of using their name and so forth, and you have to do it a certain way and with a certain methods, and you got to pay them for that privilege. Evaluating it. Selecting a franchise opportunities is an important process. First thing you need to know is, what amount of money are you comfortable with in terms of upfront, but you're also going to be able to have to borrow it, and you will be personally liable for any loans that you get. So observe some of the franchises. Do you like it? Do you want a seasonal franchise or non-seasonal? Let me give you an idea. A snow cone franchise, an ice creamery. You're not going to do much business in November to February at an ice cream place. It's going to be low sales. You're going to have to basically support the operation during those times. Do you want that? It may be the time of the year you're not wanting to work that hard. Okay, that may be perfect. And there's other ones too. There are seasonal things that are surfing type of franchises to sell surf shop stuff. Well, guess what? If it's not, you're going to make 90% of your money between probably Memorial Day and Labor Day. And that's just the way it is, because that's where people go to the beach. And so you're going to have to observe what you're interested in. What's your passion? What do you like? Advertisements. Do you think their advertisements are effective at bringing people in? That's important because they're bringing them into your store. Investigating the potential franchises. Here's some information sources. Get third-party recommendations. I mean, Entrepreneur has a list of them. They tell them the strengths and weaknesses. There's a franchise magazine. Go to the library and find it. Federal Trade Commission will also have reports on it. Better Business Bureau will also have information on it, possibly. Dun & Bradstreet will have reports on it. Internet. One of the things that you're going to, well, I'll tell you in a second. Internet. You want to talk to franchise consultants and the franchises themselves. If you're going to be a Subway franchise, try to find the owner of one. Talk to them. And I wouldn't talk to just one. I'd talk to 3 or 4 or 5. See what they like. Are they getting the support they need? Has it been worth their time and investment? Has it been profitable? Those are important things that you need to find out and get comfortable with. The franchisors themselves, they've got disclosure documents they're going to talk to you about. Next slide will tell them about that, and we'll talk about that in a second. And existing and a previous, try to find ones that have given up their franchise. May have sold out, they may love it, but they also may have had problems, and you wanted to tell them. There may be the ones like those dealers that ended up losing their franchises, and a lot of that was political in nature more so than the volume. So keep that in mind. There's a Franchise Opportunities Guide. It's in franchise.org, and they've got them for different companies. And but there's places you can find ratings for franchises. I mean, you can find information out there on the web, in magazines, especially Entrepreneur and Franchisees. Those are important. Here's another thing you need to know. Here's the ones that are the biggest this year. I've updated this recently, and I wanted to show it to you, but believe it or not, Hampton Hotels is number 1. Now, there's not many here that you have not heard of. Now, AMPM is one of the few that are unusual in the fact that it's basically it's like 7-Eleven, it's convenience stores, and they don't really put it out in their name. So that's unusual. But McDonald's, 7-Eleven, Supercuts, Days, I mean, these are names you know. None of these names are surprising. A lot of restaurants, some services, convenience stores. Interesting, they even have some learning centers, Kuhlman Math and Reading Centers. And when I looked at this, I was interested in finding some of this stuff because they're getting broader in categories than they had a few years ago. Legal issues. The franchising contract signed with legal counsel present. I'm going to explain something to you, and don't hear me wrong. You've got to have a lawyer in this. If you don't, you're an idiot. That's all I can tell you. But not just a lawyer. You really want to have a transactional lawyer. Somebody who's used to business transactions. I mean, there's some good old boy attorneys, and they are good at divorces because that's what they cover. But you need to have a transactional attorney that can understand the language in these documents. It'll contain a termination transfer provision. And under what terms are those termination transfers? Some of those are open-ended. It's franchisor can terminate any time at their choice. You really don't want that wide of language. You really want to have something with cause. And then get more specific. I mean, with cause, well, your mayonnaise deal is different from what we use, so we're terminating the franchise. You know, you don't want that. I mean, you want to have it something realistic. So keep that in mind. Contains statements of rights to renew contract. Make sure those statements are something that makes sense. I'm sure paying them on a regular basis is going to be one of them. And it could also depend, before you have to go further, it could also depend on your financial condition. If they see that you continue to be in a weak financial condition and are marginally running it, they may choose to terminate the contract and give that franchise to someone else. And you're SOL. It's just that bad. There's disclosure requirements by them under Rule 436 FTC. Every franchisor must give you a uniform franchisee offering circular. I'm going to equate this to something, and it's not exactly like it. It's similar to a private placement memorandum, or more perspective, a prospectus. Now, I know a lot of you probably buy stocks or mutual funds, and I doubt very few of you actually read a prospectus. Since I put together these things, I can tell you, read them. because that tells you a lot about the company. What you're really looking for, you want a franchisor who is making money on their product. In other words, the sale of their product, they're getting a little fee, and that's generating the profit they need. If you see franchisors dependent upon the franchise fees, what's going to happen when their growth stops or slows up significantly? How are they going to be able to stay in business? That's the question you got to ask yourself. So keep in mind, you want somebody who's making money off the product more than off the fees of operations. In other words, the fees from setting up the operations. It's also a document that's required. Remember, this is required by the FTC. Get that as soon as possible. It's also going to tell them all of their history, litigation, bankruptcy. In bankruptcy contracts, they can wipe out contracts, so keep that in mind. Have they had a history of it? I would even check on the management team to see if they've had a history of it before. Maybe they had a personal bankruptcy. I'm not worried about that. But if they've had some corporate bankruptcies that have taken out contracts like franchises before, you really need to be leery. Investment requirements. What's required? What's going to continue to be required? How's the renewal going to happen? How's termination? And sale. I mean, you're going to want to own the franchise till you're in the grave. You might want to sell it. What if you want to sell it to your son or daughter or family? Can you do that without them having to have extract another franchise fee from you? And what are those terms? Those are the questions. I've also given you an actual link to the franchise FTC site that has some information. It'll have several different links from there that you can go to, but just keep that in mind. It's important. I want to reiterate the pros and cons, starting with the cons. Existing problems. If they have existing problems, they're, not everybody likes McDonald's. I mean, most people don't go to McDonald's for high quality food. They go to McDonald's because of fast food and they know what they're getting. So you got to understand the existing problems. Poor quality of current employees. There's not very many franchises that have good fast food employees. Exception being probably Chick-fil-A. They really have a higher quality, and there's some others possibly, but poor quality of current employees. Again, same reason. Possible poor business image. Some have good images, some don't. Modernization may be required. Remember, franchises are all done under the same model, and those models have been proven in the past. That doesn't mean that McDonald's, so to speak, has gone out there and improved everything they want to. Now, McDonald's is an exception. They really do that. But many of the others don't look for better cleaning fluids that are more environmentally friendly, let's say, if you're a janitorial service. Or if you're reading, learning, is there better ways and more dynamic ways to present this so kids can understand? I mean, are they modernizing themselves? Purchase price based upon inaccurate data. I mean, would you say that a Hampton Inn franchise is more expensive than a Janiserve or a McDonald's? But what's the upside potential of those? You have to look at what money you're going to have to invest for what return on equity you should be able to get and the chance of success. Business location. Some are going to tell you exactly where you're going to locate. Others, and will help you in that process. Others don't care, but that means you could be out and getting a poor location, so you really need some help there. And the added cost of those. Pros again, high chance of success. You raise it significantly. Less planning because they've got the plans for you. Existing customers and suppliers. If you start a Subway, a lot of people will come to Subway because they know Subway. You don't have to say, I'm Subway and I sell subs. They already know that. Necessary equipment. They're going to have it for you. Bargain price. I mean, when you put it all together as a group to get exactly what you want, it is generally a good price for what you're getting. You're getting a business process and plan that's a proven success, and you're getting that at relatively reasonable prices. Now, you might not think $89,000 to $249,000 is reasonable. But you look at the franchise fees, that's really what you're paying for. The other things, if you did a business that was similar to that wing company, you would have to have all those expenses anyway. So you're really only costing $25,000 to get all of the different plans, production capabilities, and support. So keep that in mind. The only problem is you still have to pay a little bit of the fees going on by buying equipment and food from the companies. Experienced employees. They will have people they can bring in that know the system, help you out. Existing business records. They know how they got their records ready for you, the accounting, the whole bit for you.